Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today, I continue to bring you a video about the story of Hoai Ca and Hùng. That morning began very early, when the mist was still drifting lightly along the narrow paths leading out to the fields. The air after a long night was cool and fresh, carrying the familiar scent of damp earth. Hoai Ca and Hùng stepped into the fields in a rare moment of peaceful silence, each busy with their own task yet still walking side by side. The land, after the flood season, seemed reborn. Gone was the desolate look from the days when the water had just receded. In its place were lush, tender rows of green vegetables stretching evenly beneath the first rays of morning sunlight. The layer of alluvial soil left behind by the floods coated the field in a smooth, warm brown, soft and fine, as if nature had quietly compensated for the losses of the past. As she bent down to thin the vegetables, Hoai Ca told Hùng about this piece of land. She explained that besides the natural alluvial soil, the ash from dismantling the old house had unintentionally become a valuable source of nutrients. When the old house was taken down, ash from the stove and burned wood was spread evenly over the field and mixed into the soil, making it looser and better able to retain water and nutrients. There was no sophisticated fertilizer, no complicated techniques, just very simple, everyday things that ended up nourishing the vegetable garden they had today. Hoai Ca understood every layer of soil beneath her feet, because this was not only a place to grow vegetables, but also a place where she gathered hope for the days ahead. As they harvested, the two talked about long-term plans for making a living. The conversation was quiet and unpretentious, revolving only around the very practical calculations of people who work the land. Hoai Ca slowly shared her plans for the coming year. She believed that because this plot was far from home and frequently affected by floods, growing low vegetables carried too many risks. All it took was one sudden rise in water and the entire field could be wiped out in an instant, with all their effort washed away. Therefore, she planned to switch to growing corn. Corn plants are tall and sturdy. Even if floodwater passes through, they are less likely to be damaged and have a better chance of recovering afterward compared to vegetables. Hùng listened carefully to every word Hoai Ca said. He did not rush to argue or impose his own opinions. He understood that these decisions were not based on theory alone, but drawn from real losses they had endured before. He nodded in agreement, considering each option with Hoai Ca, weighing gains and losses, and calculating what would best suit the family's actual circumstances. To him, making a living was not just about immediate profit, but about finding a way to endure in the long run, without being swept away by risks beyond their capacity. Bundles of vegetables were gradually harvested and stacked full inside a bamboo basket worn smooth by time. Each bundle was neatly tied, the leaves still heavy with dew, looking fresh and full of life. Hoai Ca carefully reminded Hùng to thin only the plants that were large and mature enough to harvest, leaving the smaller ones behind. To her, farming was not about taking as much as possible in one go, but about knowing how to leave something for tomorrow. If everything was taken today, there would be nothing left to hope for afterward. That sense of thrift and care was not only in the way she farmed, but also in how she faced life. When the harvesting was temporarily finished, the two stood and looked back over the vegetable field once more, as if to make sure everything was in order. Then they prepared to take the vegetables to the market to sell. The road to the market was not close, but tender vegetables, if not sold early, would quickly become overgrown, losing their freshness and value. Both of them hoped that this trip would earn a little extra money, not much, but enough to help cover the days ahead. In each of their hearts were different concerns and calculations, yet all centered on one shared wish, that from this piece of land, they could hold on and continue building their lives through their own hard work. English translation **. On the way, Hoai Ca and Hùng stopped by to visit their two neighboring sisters, a habit they had kept for a long time. The narrow path leading to the familiar house looked the same as ever, with little having changed, except for the sense of familiarity that naturally slowed their steps. The small house welcomed them with its simple, rustic appearance, a weathered corrugated metal roof and walls darkened by time. Yet inside, it was tidy and warm. Though the space lacked many comforts, it carried a quiet sense of peace, as if the people living there had grown used to saving and enduring day by day to get through hardships. The first piece of good news immediately lightened the atmosphere in the house. The younger sister had recovered from her illness. She was no longer confined to bed as before, but was now able to run outside and play with friends in the neighborhood. Hearing this, Hoai Ca felt her heart soften. She clearly remembered previous visits, the image of the thin little girl lying still on the bed, her face pale and her eyes weary, always tugged painfully at her heart. Each time she left, that heavy feeling lingered with her for a long while. Now, simply knowing that the child was healthier, able to laugh, talk, and run around, was already something to be grateful for, as if a quiet burden in her heart had finally been set down. The conversation gradually shifted to the approaching year-end days. When Tet was mentioned, the sisters' voices slowed, tinged with hesitation. Their parents worked far away, with unstable jobs. Money was already tight, and wages were often delayed, so this year they could only arrange to come home for a few short days. As a result, Tet for the two sisters would be much simpler. There would be little shopping, just tidying up the house, buying some rice to make traditional cakes, and waiting for other necessities until their parents returned. Their words carried no complaints, yet they were enough for anyone listening to sense the quiet shortages the sisters were bearing. Hoai Ca listened in silence, not interrupting nor rushing to offer comfort. She understood that some things did not require many words. Simply listening was already a form of sharing. Those hardships were not unfamiliar to her. The feeling of being ill without family by one's side, the experience of waiting from one meal to the next, one day to another, she had lived through all of that herself. Because of this, what she felt was not pity, but genuine empathy. Helping others, to her, had never been about receiving thanks or recognition. It was simply because she cared, because she saw her own past reflected in theirs, and did not want anyone to endure such things alone. In the middle of the conversation, Hoai Ca gently extended an invitation. She told them that this Tet, if they had time, their whole family should come over to her house to visit. A home felt livelier with more people, she said. It created a true spring atmosphere, whereas silence could make Tet feel lonely. The invitation was spoken naturally, without exaggeration or calculation, as if it were simply the obvious thing to do. Hearing this, the sisters' faces brightened, their initial shyness gradually giving way to a warm sense of comfort. The conversation thus grew much closer. Inside the small house, everyday stories flowed one after another, quiet yet enough to chase away some of the year-end chill. Hoai Ca and Hùng took their leave when the afternoon had grown late, carrying with them a feeling of lightness in their hearts. It was not a grand joy, but a gentle warmth born from simple sharing among people of similar circumstances, who understood that sometimes just a kind inquiry or a sincere invitation could be enough to make the Tet season feel a little more complete. When they reached the market, Hoai Ca began laying out the vegetables to sell. The bundles, still heavy with morning dew, were neatly arranged on a small tarpaulin. The leaves were tender and green, the stems crisp and clean. One glance was enough to see the freshness straight from the fields. The price was reasonable, no higher than others, so before long many people stopped by to ask and buy. Some were familiar faces, others complete strangers, but everyone paused for a few moments to look, to ask a question or two. Hoai Ca answered patiently, her hands swiftly weighing the vegetables, a gentle smile always on her face. For her, the market was not just a place to trade goods, but also a way to feel the rhythm of life as the year-end bustle slowly grew stronger. That day, the market already carried hints of Tet. Along the aisles, fresh flowers, ornamental plants, small kumquat trees, and early peach blossoms were displayed side by side. Red lanterns hung sparkling, while tinsel and colorful decorations made the familiar space suddenly more vibrant. Laughter mixed with bargaining, calls echoing back and forth, creating that distinctive excitement unique to the days leading up to Tet. Amid that scene, Hùng took the chance to walk around the market. He chose a modest kumquat tree, nothing too elaborate in shape, but evenly fruited and lush green, along with a few red lanterns and some simple decorations. He hoped that just these small things would be enough to bring spring a little earlier into their familiar home. The market day ended when most of the vegetables had been sold. The two packed up, tied together the items they had bought, and headed home. Afternoon descended slowly, the sunlight fading along the familiar road. When they arrived, they did not rest right away but began tidying up. The house, already neat, was cleaned more carefully, each small corner rearranged. Hùng hung the lanterns at the front porch, while Hoai Ca carefully placed the kumquat tree in the most visible spot. Flowers were arranged in a vase and set on the table. The green of the leaves blending with the red of the lanterns created an unexpectedly warm feeling. The familiar house suddenly felt different. Without elaborate decorations, just a few simple touches were enough to make the space brighter and more welcoming. When everything was more or less finished, the two sat down to rest, poured themselves some water, and quietly looked around at the newly decorated home. In that moment, Hoai Ca clearly felt a gentle excitement rising within her, a very light, very real anticipation of Tet. It was not loud or showy, but enough to warm the heart after a year filled with hardships. In those rare moments of rest, Hoai Ca slowly shared her plans for the future. She spoke of wanting to learn how to grow flowers, not just for their beauty, but to truly understand how to care for them and make them bloom at the right time. She imagined opening a small flower garden, selling potted plants to people at the market, and eventually combining it with experiential tourism so visitors could come, tend the plants themselves, and feel a life closer to nature. These plans were spoken calmly, without lofty dreams, just as a series of small, connected steps, taken one at a time. Hùng listened, not rushing to comment or weigh pros and cons. He understood that such dreams would require time and patience. He simply nodded, saying that he would walk alongside her, helping step by step, from finding land to rent, learning from others' experience, to finally putting the plans into action. They were not grand or empty promises, but a quiet, genuine presence, just as he had always been there along the road they had already traveled. Inside the small house now touched with the breath of spring, that companionship became a silent anchor, linking today with the plans that still lay ahead. At the end of the day, everything gradually returned to its familiar rhythm of life. As the sunlight completely slipped behind the rows of trees, Hoai Ca became busy once again with her daily routines. She lit the stove to cook dinner, thin wisps of smoke rising and blending into the late afternoon air, carrying a comforting, familiar warmth. After that, she collected the eggs, carefully checking each nest, then turned to tend to the chickens and rabbits. Each task was small and repeated day after day, yet to Hoai Ca, they were an essential part of life, the foundation that allowed her to hold on and keep moving forward. While working, Hoai Ca continued to calculate in her mind how to manage her livestock sensibly. She knew her limits well, never overextending herself, never chasing trends. If there was profit, she would continue. If not, she would keep the breeding stock, care for them steadily, and wait for the right time. Most importantly, she wanted to avoid losses, to ensure that her daily efforts would not turn into a burden. These thoughts were not grand or ambitious, but they had been built up from many experiences, from past missteps, shaping the caution she now carried into every decision. Hùng also took the time to arrange his own work. He prepared to head to his office to join a trip delivering Tet gifts to disadvantaged households. This task had been planned in advance, and he knew the trip would keep him away from home for several days. Even so, he prepared carefully documents, essentials, without a single complaint. To him, it was both a responsibility and something that needed to be done in the final days of the year, when many families were still struggling to prepare for the coming Tet. The moment of parting was brief, yet enough for both of them to understand each other more deeply. There was no need for many reminders, nor for heavy words. Just a quiet understanding that each of them was doing their best in their own way. Hoai Ca stayed behind to take care of everything at home, while Hùng set out to complete his duties, each going a different direction, yet sharing the same sense of purpose. A day passed without anything particularly momentous, no major events, no unexpected turns. Yet within those simple moments lay a unique sense of fullness. It was the sharing found in small conversations, the companionship that needed no display, the reassurance of knowing there was always someone beside you, ready to shoulder the burdens together. Those seemingly trivial tasks quietly wove everything together, creating a slow but steady rhythm of life. In moments like these, Tet seemed to draw very near. Not only in the colorful streets outside, not only in the increasingly crowded markets, but right within each person's heart. It was the warmth of seeing the house lit up at night, the peace of mind when thinking about tomorrow, the hope nurtured from the smallest daily efforts. Stay tuned for the next episode to discover what comes next.
Xin chào tất cả mọi người đã quay trở lại với kênh của mình nhé. Hôm nay thì mình lại đưa đến video tiếp theo về câu chuyện của Ly Hoai Ca nha. Mình đang edit video, giờ mình mới đặt tên video đây. Cảm ơn mọi người đã theo dõi kênh của mình nhé. Cảm ơn mọi người, hẹn gặp lại mọi người trong những video tiếp theo.